This meeting is called to order.
Okay, Member Bierce? Here. Member Hodges and Member Larson are absent. Member Lieberman?
Here.
Member Melgen?
Here.
Member Rose Shears is also absent. And Chair Vahil McClanahan.
Here. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lishan. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. First order of business is to approve the minutes from the June 18th Climate Action Committee. I was not there, so I'm not going to vote on this or make a motion.
I noticed that in the minutes it says that I voted to approve the prior minutes, but I hadn't been at that meeting, so I abstained. Anyway, minor cleanup, but that was the only thing that I noticed. Other than that, I'm happy to make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thanks for pointing that out. I can fix that. Thank you. Sorry. 1 second. Let me just note that down. Okay. Member Bierce?
Yes.
Member Lieberman?
Yes.
Member Melgen?
Yes.
Chair Vahil McClanahan.
Abstaining. I feel like our mics are extra loud this evening. Does it feel that way to anyone else?
I don't know.
Maybe not. All right, it is time for public comment on any matter not on the agenda.
Okay, up first we have Nick Peterson. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, and thank you for taking my call. I'm checking to make sure you can hear me because I got indication it was difficult to hear me before. Can you hear me okay?
Yes?
Yes, it's okay. If you could speak maybe a tiny bit slower or clearer, it might help a touch, but it is okay.
Yeah, I'm using my phone rather than my laptop because I think it has the worst microphone, so I'll try to speak up. Anyway, I wanted to thank the Climate Action Committee members and staff for working fast to get certain items on the agenda and responding to suggestions for agenda items. I really feel, looking and considering agenda items suggested by community members is valuable and gives us a sense that we're being listened to. So I just wanted to make an extra effort to thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Next we have Lucinda Young. Please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. I first will reiterate what Nick Peterson, thank you from Nick Peterson. I also really appreciate seeing that on the agenda tonight. I would like to make a comment about the capital improvement plan that City Council last week approved. I believe I had sent an email to City Council, and I had also made public comment at the City Council meeting and copied the Climate Action Committee on my email about the concern that EV chargers, which were in the previous CIP, were excluded from the current CIP. And this concerns me. I do feel like it's a step backwards. The Public Works Manager, or Public Works Director, I'm not sure his title exactly, Mark Hurley, had indicated in putting together the capital improvement plan, he had visited the Transportation Committee and visited Parks and Recreation and gotten feedback from both of those committees. But what was sadly lacking was any mention of feedback from the Climate Action Committee. And I think I've attended every meeting of the Climate Action Committee in the last year. I don't remember Mr. Hurley appearing, and I'm wondering if he received any feedback from the Climate Action Committee in putting together the capital improvement plan. So again, one of my concerns is that that Climate Action Committee is not being used in its full capacity. Also, that's all I'll mention right now. Thank you.
No other public, oh, wait, yeah.
Do we have any public comment? That's correct, yeah. Any comment on something not on the agenda? Okay.
Okay, thank you, commenters. The first item under presentation, well, the one presentation we have tonight is about the AVA Community Energy Resilience Hub Program.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to be speaking tonight about AVA Community Energy's Resilience Hub program. There's been a lot of interest in this program, and just kind of providing a presentation to clarify what exactly the program is and what the different steps would be, how all of it works, just to make sure that everyone's on the same page. I recently had the chance to speak to one of the AVA staff members that's working on this, as well as one of the grantee who's implementing it, to learn a little bit more about how this program works. So I'll start off with a little bit of background about a separate but related program that we worked on with AVA a few years ago. This is the Critical Municipal Facilities Program. It started out in 2021, and in 2022 we began working with AVA on this program. And it was designed to help install solar and battery storage capacity at critical municipal facilities, as you would imagine. So things like City Hall, community centers, firehouses, police stations, basically all the facilities that you would need to stay running in an emergency situation. So not exactly a resilience hub, but sort of interrelated, and also focused on solar and storage. So we entered phase 3 of this program. They have 3 phases with different groups of cities in each one. And we passed a resolution through council, basically allowing staff to work with AVA's technical consultants and other staff to kind of do the analyses of how much solar would need to be on different buildings and where it would fit and what the cost, all these sorts of things. That actual process of doing the technical analysis has not happened yet. They sort of switched over to focusing on the phase 1 cities and trying to develop an RFP and get consultants on board to actually do the construction work and create the power purchasing agreement. And they're still in that process. There's, I think, been several delays and some trouble with it. So they're still working on the phase 1 cities at the moment. It's not clear whether that's actually going to become available for us at some point or not. We're still sort of waiting and seeing on that. But yeah, so that is a program that we've been working with AVA on and is still sort of in the mix. The Resilience Hub program is separate, although related, like I said. It was created last year by AVA, and they chose Emerald Cities Collaborative as the implementer. And this program is really focused on what a resilience hub means to the community. It's, it's still meant for resilience in emergency situations or times when you need resilience for various reasons, but it's not specific to municipal facilities. And it has sort of a wider definition that's somewhat in flux. And so Emerald Cities has spent basically the last year working on community engagement to sort of define what Resilience Hub means and think a little bit more about what that could entail and what we want Resilience Hubs to look like and how AVA can be involved in that process. And they're now getting to this point where they're working on pilot screenings of potential Resilience Hub sites. And that's sort of the current phase is they've developed the screening to figure out if a site is a good potential Resilience Hub and a potential place specifically for solar installation and battery storage. That's really what they're focused on for the most part. In the fall, probably, those sites that go through the screening and are eligible will be given free technical assistance. And then they're hoping late this year or maybe early next year to finish the creation of an incentive program to cover some of the costs of solar and storage installation. So I'll go into each of those pieces in a little bit more detail. The screening phase, they did provide me with the screening form that would need to be filled out. And there's several sections. It goes into things like the utility bills, electrical infrastructure, building plans, the current and planned site usage, including questions about like what kinds of resilience services would this site provide? How many people might it be providing services to? What kind of capacity is needed? So some kind of bigger questions like that. And then solar sizing calculations, and then financial planning as well, basically to determine that the site will continue functioning and serving the community for, a ways into the future, and also that a site would be able to pay for the majority of an installation because the incentive would only cover a percentage. So some of the pieces of it are fairly simple. Some require kind of digging up records and calculating stuff. And some of the pieces of this are more of a discussion about, okay, what would this look like and what do the finances look like? And it kind of gets a bit more complicated. So that's kind of what the screening process itself looks like. I mentioned in the memo that it's a little bit hard to say how much staff time that might take. My guess was somewhere between like 10 and 40 hours, but if we went into kind of like a more in-depth discussion of what a resilience hub looks like in Albany and kind of really got into that, it could be more. So that's sort of a rough estimate, knowing that it kind of depends on how we would approach something like this. So assuming that the site, and I think we're mostly talking about the community center here, although theoretically another building could be a resilience hub site. Assuming that it's eligible, it would receive free technical assistance from AVA. And that would include studies to assess the feasibility of solar and storage installation. That's really kind of the main focus. Potentially reviewing contractor proposals, and also access to a database of grants for resilience hubs that we might be able to qualify for. So that's sort of where we would get into the meat of, figuring out what an installation would look like, how many kilowatts of solar we would need, where we would be putting batteries, what kind of electrical upgrades would be needed, you know, all that kind of stuff. And that process could potentially overlap with the building needs assessment that was laid out in the CIP. That's something that's planned, I think, starting next year, is to basically go through like what are the needs, what are the kind of infrastructure needs, upgrade needs of the different city facilities we have. And that could include a discussion about what kind of resilience upgrades do we need and what kind of solar needs do we have? And it also gets into electrification and all those other things we've talked about. So it could kind of fit into that existing plan. And the outcome of that technical assistance would be basically a report that would help us with future project decisions. So it wouldn't be saying, okay, we're going to get this technical assistance, and then 3 days later we're going to go out to bid, and then we're going to have solar installed immediately. It would be more about, okay, we're doing this analysis to see what the options are and how much they cost, and then kind of going from there. That's generally how this would be done. Incentive funding, as you can see, is a small slide because there's a lot up in the air here. AVA is planning to develop an incentive program, but it's not developed at this point. They told me that they expected that it would be a reimbursement program that would cover about 20 to 30% of the project costs for the sites that were selected. You know, it's not clear at that point. At this point, if that's the final number, if it would be covering just certain parts of the project or the whole cost, you know, so that's all very much up in the air. But there is a potential of getting funding for some of this work. And I think another really big question mark is, what would that site selection process look like? You know, is Albany likely to receive funding in a project like this? How are they going to determine the eligibility? How are they going to determine priority? You know, one thing that we often get a little hesitant about is that a lot of programs really prioritize sites that have some sort of disadvantaged community or, you know, equity things to think about. And usually when that happens, Albany is not on the list. And that's, you know, for a very good reason, but it means that we need to be smart about how we're spending our time and what kind of funding we're going after. So at this point, those questions are still undecided for their program. It might be that they design it in a way that Albany would be prioritized, but we just don't know yet. So I think we would really be focusing on, you know, what's the value of the technical assistance and, you know, what would we be getting from that and how does that fit into our other plans? And the incentive funding is maybe something that would be helpful down the line. Sort of a way of thinking about it. So that's sort of an overview of what this program looks like. Obviously, there are still unanswered questions and plenty of things that I don't know about it, and I'll have to go back and ask the AVA staff. And if you have more questions, I'm happy to carry it over. I had a conversation with some of the folks in Public Works about this program today, so they're aware of it. We're planning to have more conversations with the AVA and Emerald City staff to learn more about what exactly it entails and figure out next steps from there. I will say it's not something that necessarily needs council approval for us to go forward with on a staff level, just with like the screening and assessment piece. Although depending on the way we want to approach it might be something that's helpful to bring to council. So that's all a little bit up in the air too. But yeah, it's definitely something we're continuing to look into and learn more about.
My main question would be, do you know when they're going to have the timeline or when they're going to have the guidelines for how they pick cities or locations, or when they're going to have the program for incentives developed? Like, will that coming soon?
It sounded like they were planning to have that laid out by the end of this year, early next year. So I'm guessing December, January. Things often get delayed, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was like next spring, but that sounded like their plan.
In the memo, you mentioned the necessity of separating the battery storage from nearby buildings for safety. But I'm not familiar with approximately how far.
I'm also not familiar with that. Yeah, for transparency, Jeff Bond, our director, added that in. He knows a lot more about it, and he is retired as of yesterday. Yes, we all wish him a farewell and miss him dearly. But yeah, I did speak with our public works director, and he brought that up as well today, that there are fire concerns when it comes to very large battery systems, and so sometimes they have to be moved off site, or they have to be kind of protected in ways that are large and expensive. So there definitely are some concerns with location and stuff, and I think it depends not just on like how many feet away the batteries are, but also like where they are in space and what other kind of fire hazard concerns there might be. But yeah, that would be something I think we'd figure out within the technical assistance process, probably. Any other questions?
I feel like I read this, but I can't recall how many projects they anticipate moving forward in that queue.
I don't think they have a number yet.
Okay.
At least I didn't know of one.
Okay.
I mean, I actually don't know if they even have a budget determined, so, yeah.
Okay. Do you know if other cities are interested? Like, I'm sort of trying to get a sense of like, what's the likelihood if we put in, if the Royal, we put in the 10 to 40 hours, like what is the probability of actually getting this project through, if there's any indicator of that?
Yeah, I think part of the trouble is that at this point it's so, it's very much unbaked. It's in the batter stage, which makes it really hard to estimate. With these kinds of things, I'm often a bit wary, like I said, because of the prevalence of equity prioritization, which I'm sure we're all big fans of, but it does mean that Albany is often passed over. So that's the kind of main thing that gives me pause. And also, we only have a few buildings, and they're smaller than some of the buildings in other cities where they've got these big facilities, and you could do huge solar arrays, and it's sort of more efficient, more cost efficient. But that said, I think it's very possible that maybe there isn't a ton of interest, and there's a lot of little nonprofits and churches, and Albany is maybe one of the better options. So I wouldn't discount it entirely, but I think we just have to kind of be cautious about it.
And do you know, so there was critical municipal facilities. I'm assuming that those facilities, from that program, those facilities are not going to be, they're sort of settled and they have their system. So I'm just wondering if this is sort of another bite at the apple where maybe we have a better chance because the top tier projects have already kind of been settled in that program.
Yeah, I mean, so there's, I think, 4 cities that are currently in that phase 1. So it's not a huge number of sites, but yeah, I wouldn't imagine that they would apply for both, because it's really basically the same installation. It's solar and storage that we're talking about for both projects. So yeah, I'd say, for those 4 cities, they're probably kind of out of the running.
What are the 4 cities for the first one, the critical municipal facilities one?
Sorry, say that again?
Which 4 cities are those?
I think it's Berkeley, Hayward, maybe Fremont, maybe Oakland. That's my guess. I think Berkeley's in there. I'd have to double check, but.
I think Berkeley is in there.
I don't totally know what Ava's territory is, especially since expanding. Does this apply to all of Ava's territory?
Yes, I think it's actually all of Alameda County. Most of Alameda County is within Ava's service territory, except for some sections. But I think it actually covers all of Alameda County, and then also some parts of San Joaquin County.
Lathrop and Stockton, I think?
Yes, yeah.
Any other questions? All right, let's move to public comment. Do we have public comment in the room? We'll go to the room first.
Okay, this may be a little better. My name is Jean Wu. I live here. I'm a physician. I'm really concerned that we don't have a resilience hub or any plans that I have seen to deal with major disasters. I'm going to read you the quasi-definition from AVA Community Energy. This is not finalized. This is a quasi-definition from AVA. Resilience hubs are physical, community-serving facilities that provide essential services, distribute critical resources during emergencies, and integrate clean energy solutions to maintain operation during power outages. They also serve as year-round community spaces where local residents regularly gather. I think that would include the community center, which is year-round and people gather and there are a lot of events. And it has several things that are very useful. It has a parking lot that can be used for solar. We've estimated you can put about 100 kilowatts of solar, and we've estimated probably need about 300 kilowatt hours of battery in that space. It also has a community kitchen, which you are looking at upgrading, which means it will have induction stoves and probably many other things that are very useful for the community. It also has the ability, if it doesn't have it already, of having heat pumps installed, which can do cooling as well as heating and become a cooling center. And it also can provide charging ability and communication centers, which apparently in the basement there's some kind of communication center. It is one of only 2 sites that are approved by the American Red Cross to become resilient centers. In Albany, the other one is the senior center, which is smaller and not as well situated. I wanted to make a point about batteries because I do batteries. I do solar and batteries. I have a company that's called Custom Powered Solar, and I did a lot of research on batteries. So the main kind of batteries that people get worried about are the lithium-ion batteries, ION, and those are old style. No one uses those anymore. The ones that burned at Moss Landing, those are poorly installed lithium-ion batteries. The ones that people use now are lithium iron phosphate, IRON. They are meant to not burn. They have a very low propensity to burn, and I've been told that when they get heated up, the only thing that matters is the plastic cases melt. However, there's a newer kind of battery called sodium ion, which does not burn at all. You can do anything to it, it won't burn. And these are being employed now in China in cars and will potentially be employed here. And there is grant money that has been released by CEC to startups now in California to develop these batteries in California. My discussion with them is that they're on path to develop these batteries and bring them out sometime in the next year. 9 seconds. And then the distance that you need to be from the building is usually about 5 feet for most battery sizes, but it may vary depending on the size of the battery. But the newer batteries are not a fire hazard. Thank you. Oh, there are also 50 sites were supposed to be chosen for the, I don't think they're going to get there.
Thank you. That was really helpful information.
Yes, my name's Marilyn Jossens. I've lived in Albany for nearly 40 years. I've been involved in different aspects of Albany over that period of time. Now I'm one of the elders. It has come to my awareness over the years that Albany, to my knowledge, doesn't have a really good disaster plan for various kinds of disasters that could occur. And now with climate change, we see in the papers all the time where that happens. And I think that one of the integral needs of these plans is communication and the ability for people to have energy, to be able to communicate with each other and to find out what's going on. And I've found through my own personal experience that with all of these changes, with all of these services, you know, there were fiber optics and digital and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and I always had my landline. I thought that was what was going to save me if there was an emergency. And actually, I learned from Sonic one time that those landlines don't really exist to the degree that we think they do. So it just seems to me that there needs to be some urgency in putting a plan together. And even if these plans, like you were mentioning, that Albany oftentimes gets overlooked because of equity issues or things like that, doesn't matter. I mean, the urgency is still there, so we need to come from a place of, we're gonna do this. We gotta, and we don't just put it on the agenda again and again and again. We need some kind of planning that goes into effect, and there needs to be involvement with the community, and I think that this is a good time for that involvement to be communicated to the community, because people are so aware of some of these disasters that have occurred, and what kinds of resources we do have and what we need. And I know with the schools, when that happened, I was one of the first people that was involved with school care. We were just not going to get the money, so the people got together and created school care, and it's a thriving foundation at this point. So when you need something, you need to put into your mind all of the things that are problematic, but you need to have your bottom line is that this is really an urgent need at this point, and we need to go forward with something. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Do we also have online comments?
Nick Peterson, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for unmuting me. I have no ability to see what my timeline is, but I'll try to keep this brief. First of all, I want the two previous speakers that spoke very well and knowledgeably of concerns and technology and benefits. And I have to say, I'm hugely disappointed in sort of the discussion the Climate Action Committee and staff have had, which seem to be looking for ways to find this as difficult, problematic, not worth doing, and full of all hurdles, and inevitably will be kicked out because Albany never qualifies for anything. I think that's an extremely negative approach to take, and is telling of the lack of enthusiasm and support for doing some of these critical things we need to do. There's also no creativity. We're going to have to kludge together the CIP plan for the community center, plus the electrification plan for the community center, plus the emergency resilience plan for the community center, to come up with something that's infinitely better than what's there now, that will be resilient, have cheaper power available and won't pollute. And we have to enthusiastically embrace that. So it's very telling that master bureaucrat Jeff Bond left the sour note of burning batteries on this and was insistent in inserting that. And I challenge you to not take that kind of, no able to do it, wet blanket attitude to these ideas that are for the benefit of the community in difficult and challenging times. This also causes me a lot of concern because with the urgency of climate, and we're going to talk about how our climate action plan is woefully out of date. We really need champions that push these along and push them. 40 hours of, what are we afraid of? 40 hours of time? That's nothing. If we get, a kind of put together plan that greatly improves our ability to address climate change and to be ready for hazards. And I speak as someone that is on the Albany Climate Action Coalition and also Albany CERT, Inc., a nonprofit that has studied, we actually came up with a $25,000 PG&E grant and developed pop-up community hubs 2 or 3 years ago, and didn't get much city support on any of that either. So I just want to jar you guys a little bit and say, come on, let's get some enthusiasm behind this and let's champion these things. And rather than just, worrying and wringing our hands about things we don't even know yet, can we at least take the first step to get free, at least from Ava, analysis on this and see how it merges with our capital improvement plan and with our climate action goals. Thank you very much.
Lucinda Young, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And I do not have the time is not coming up on my screen, or if you're able to
We're working
do
on
that,
that.
that would help in my monitoring my time. Thank you. I would like to echo my support for all the previous speakers. I think I do have some questions, which I'll ask second, just about the presentation, some things I didn't quite understand. But with the increase in extreme climate events due to climate change, along with our living in, earthquake territory, I think it's very important that we look hard at how we might create a resilience center here in Albany. It seems to me that 10 to 40 hours is certainly asking staff to spend 10 to 40 hours was certainly worth getting the free technical assistance. I realize that it's very hard at this point to predict whether we would be selected or not, but it just seems that it's worth the additional time given the need here. I had a couple of questions. First of all, I'm wondering, Michelle indicated that she had a little feedback from Public Works about their concern about batteries. And I think that we've had staff express concerns in the past about batteries. That was one of their reasons for not supporting, for example, the electric parking enforcement vehicle. They expressed concerns about batteries on that. Jean Wu, who is very knowledgeable about solar and batteries, has already addressed that concern. I think, again, that staff may be looking for reasons to not pursue this project, and that's not in the benefit of our city. One question I did have also is just to find out from Michelle, were there other concerns expressed besides battery fires? And if so, I'm wondering if we can look at addressing those. And another question I had is right in the beginning of Michelle's presentation, some of this was, I had a little interruption, but I wasn't sure I understood. Michelle, did you say that Albany did apply and City Council did pass a resolution for Albany to be considered under phase 1? And is that still ongoing, or is that closed now? Albany was not selected. I'm just trying to get a little more background here. Thank you.
Looks like we don't have any more public comment. I can go ahead and address those last two questions. So on the phase 1, so Albany did apply, I guess, or pass a resolution kind of allowing us to be part of phase 3 and to do the technical assistance work as part of the critical municipal facilities program, not this Resilience Hub program. AVA is currently working on phase 1, but we're in phase 3. And then the other questions about other concerns, I think, yeah, there was the battery fire concern, but, I don't think there were really other concerns that came up in terms of logistics. I think the other staff members I talked to are interested in the possibility of getting technical assistance to learn more about what's possible in the building. And, there's just not that much knowledge right now about what exactly would fit where and how much it would cost. And, so I think there's kind of this perspective of thinking, okay, we can get technical assistance and learn more about what the options are and then go from there, and just kind of keeping the scope from moving too far ahead of ourselves. And, obviously there's sort of a hesitancy to be too excited about the possibility of getting a bunch of incentive funding, right? But that's not to say that we can't look into it and get technical assistance. Yeah, I think the other kind of question for us to consider is just, yeah, how much will this involve for us to get technical assistance? Does it seem like it's a good site that's worth putting time into, or are there things that are going to kind of cross us off the list quickly or something like that? Those are just the things we're kind of trying to learn about what exactly the technical assistance entails and just how helpful it will be, because some technical assistance folks are better than others. Some of them are less helpful. So just trying to make sure we really know what we're getting for the effort. But yeah, that's what I would say. I don't think there are kind of these glaring concerns, oh, this is a terrible program or anything like that. It's just more about making sure we know the kind of value proposition, and then also, again, not getting too far ahead of what's currently available, if that makes sense.
All right,
Another
we'll open it up
commenter who
for,
raised their hand, I think. Someone else on the public comment?
Oh, yeah, that is a new commenter. If that's okay, Chair,
Yeah,
we
go
can
for it.
reopen it. Okay.
James Sinatra, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me? Sorry, I don't have my camera on.
Yeah, go ahead.
I live at Pomona, 711 Pomona, and I've lived in Albany for 25 years, and I do have 20 years of solar experience. I just retired, so I'm able to offer free technical assistance for project management for residential and commercial development for the solar arm of any future. That's it. Thank you.
thank you. We'll move on to, thanks for spotting that, Catherine, to discussion among the committee.
So I'm a project manager, PMP, and Scrum Master, and one thing I look for as a project manager is scope creep. Is if you have a potential opportunity, what could that mean in terms of, is it well-defined? Is it easy to do within the initial scope you're thinking of? And would it expand to take over everyone's time? This is a great idea. I love the fact that there's opportunity to get some funding and technical assistance, and my concern is the juice being worth the squeeze, as they say. So I do concur that we should look into this, but it doesn't feel as urgent to me as making sure that the compostable food ordinance is implemented well, the gas pipeline decommissioning gets implemented well, and there are all the other programs that we're working on right now that need to get attention and funding. So I know there's a lot of enthusiasm here from the community, and I want to acknowledge that and appreciate that. And I do think that that idea of the James Netra talking about free public assistance, of leveraging community volunteers as opportunities for assistance here could be a really great opportunity, because I wonder if that would be a way to get some planning support without having to dedicate, it could be 100 hours of time. Because initially the community was saying this was a 4-hour project to fill the questionnaire. If it's 10x the estimate from the community's estimate, it seems like there's a lot of variance in what this could involve. So I would say definitely yes, do this if we knew criteria for how we could be included in the selection process of what they're looking for. The equity concerns example is a piece of that. We don't know how they're choosing. There's uncertainty around the budget and uncertainty around how many people are applying. So seeing all those uncertainties adding up and compounding makes me worried about it not being helpful in terms of we're not going to get a bunch of funding. And you get the funding, then you can't even pay for it, so you have to go back to council for more money. It just becomes a huge snowballing frustration for staff. So I think it's a great idea, and we should look at, we need to figure this out because we need to complete our emergencies. I would be interested in directing the staff or ideas for what's our current plan? If it happens tomorrow, what do we do? What's going on, and what's the current plan? And how do we improve on that? Maybe the version 1 is get the free help from the community solar experts, and there's a lot of people in the audience who do this. And then maybe we do have staff time applying for this program, but I think the important information I would need to know is what's the delta between our current emergency plan and our resilience hub, desired future. We do want to have more coordinated work across the city in terms of across, the fire and community center and resilience hub and CERT and staff and all these different things. Is it significantly different that we can the outcome from what our current plan is? I saw their solar panels on the fire department. The other day I saw them. What are they doing? Are they having battery storage on their setup? Like, what do they get that we don't get here, or that we would get here that we would significantly different? So really important that we do this, but the question is when, and the huge amount of uncertainty about what they're actually offering seems to be something that I'm concerned about, because it seems like it could be a lot more work in the end than it is. Oh yeah, I fill out a form, sure, but like then you get to this whole long thing. So I think we should do something like this, and the question is when, like maybe when the gas pipeline project is done.
Other thoughts on this?
Well, I agree with everything Catherine just said. That made a lot of sense to me. The other thing I'd ask, I just have a lack of knowledge. I know that the city has some emergency communication networks right now, and there's a backup of some sort where the CERT training is located. And I'd like to know what that does and what the Resilience Hub would do beyond that.
So I'd say this is a great opportunity to have something. If you have time, great, let's do it. But I'm sure your schedule's pretty full with the gas pipeline project and the compostable foodware and other things. So the question is, like, what will get put to the side if we add this? I think that would be good to know from staff of like how much is on your plate currently, like capacity utilization. I'm guessing it's pretty full. So the question is, what has to get pushed off that if we're going to add this? Is my guess as a project manager.
Other comments?
Yeah, I support what the other members have said. I'm really enthusiastic about this, partly out of fear of us having an earthquake and wishing that we had a resilience hub in Albany. It's a great, like Jean was saying, it's a great location. It's really does fit the criteria. So I don't want what I'm about to say come off as not being enthusiastic about this. I'm very enthusiastic about this opportunity, but like my co-members of the committee, I'm concerned about the bandwidth that we have. And there's this sort of trade-off between putting time into what we control, which is like the compostable food waste, the EVs, the gas decommissioning. Those are things that we can move forward. The time you spend on those is productive time. And I don't know how much time you have for this project, and it is uncertain what will happen. So it's a little bit of a rolling of the dice. I think it's really hard. I sympathize with your situation trying to weigh all these things because, do you roll the dice and spend some time on this opportunity or do you not? I hope that you have the time. I really want this to move forward, and that I think it's a pretty high priority if you can get this done. I really want Albany to have this resilience hub, and the only way that I think this is the best path to having one. So I don't want to lose the opportunity, but I will understand if you say this is not doable. I get that.
Yeah, I agree with Dan that this is important work to do that we may not otherwise get done in a timely fashion. We're often reliant, I am learning, on partnership with other organizations to get done things that are frankly quite central to our mission, especially when it comes to climate. I brought my handy dandy copy of the plan. There are more action items in this plan than I'm going to take all of your time reading that are pertinent to this. But needless to say, the people who put this plan together in 2019, before some of us, including myself, Catherine, moved here, they wanted us to do this. It's in the plan. There are several goals under provide services during extreme events that I believe we have not really invested much staff time in, or much policy in, or much funding in. We have a really good volunteer organization in CERT, Community Emergency Response Team. They're huge. They train, at this point, I think hundreds of residents. So they're doing their part, but we need to step up. The city needs to step up and be a real partner in this. And how lucky we are that Ava's putting it out there that they could help us do our part. So in my view, we should absolutely go for this. I'm encouraged to hear that you're planning to meet with Ava some more. Maybe, did you say also talk with Public Works a little more?
Yeah, we're planning to put a meeting together with the AVA folks and Public Works staff.
Okay, great. That sounds like an important step to get any more information that's needed. Even with the information we have and the muddiness of the parameters, I still think we should go for it because we as a city planned to do this and it's past time to follow through. That's my opinion.
Thanks for the reminder that's in the plan. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and add to all those comments. I think, you know, there was some discussion about what do we have to put aside to do this and priority. And I think one of the things that within the Public Works Department they're thinking might be helpful is, you know, if there's a way to kind of dovetail this work with the building needs assessment and kind of electrification planning work that they're already planning to do. I think that would make it so that we're not using a bunch of extra time and kind of able to look at everything holistically. So I'm hopeful that that's the case. It might be that the timing doesn't work or the scope doesn't work or there are other things that make it more complicated. And yeah, I think it'll kind of come down to really looking at like what exactly the offering is and what it takes. But that's kind of my hope with it. And then I also think that it kind of gets into this larger discussion that you were all bringing up about, you know, what does it mean to have a resilience hub in the city and what do we need to be planning for? And that may well involve solar and storage installation, but it also includes a lot of other things. And, you know, I think as part of that building needs assessment, we can kind of bring this up as a question of not just what do we need for the building to host the various events it does throughout the year, but what do we need in case of an earthquake or in case of this or that. So I think that's kind of all in the discussion and not just within this one program, but also within that larger assessment that's coming up. So that's just something I'll flag. I don't know much about our disaster planning. That's more within the fire and police, that sort of realm. But there is a local hazard mitigation plan that we have, and some other disaster planning work that's been done. So yeah, that might be something the committee's interested in thinking about. I'd have to look into all of that and see what's happening there because it's not really my wheelhouse, but I know there is planning that has been done. So
It's good to hear that you're already, you know, planning on electrification for the buildings and the needs assessments. So if there's an opportunity to get free help that you're already doing, that sounds like a really good win-win to help move this forward.
Yeah, I will share that we received some requests via email, I think, to the whole committee to provide a specific directive, like recommend that City Council specifically direct staff to work on this. It sounds like you are working on this. My only question pursuant to that is, in all of this haziness, what is your best guess at what their deadline is for our completion of this application?
I don't know that there's a specific deadline. It seems like the way they're planning this out is that they are having the first people finish the screening before they create the incentive program, which, like I said, is like maybe December, January, if they stay on schedule. But I think at that point, the screening would still be open. It would just be like a second, round or something. So
I think it sounds like maybe, did you have other knowledge of that, Jean, about timeline?
I think it's really important to realize that they have $2 million allocated for these screenings. So they know the budget and they know that they want to reach the community members. both private and, in our case, I made the argument municipal. They need to include us. So they haven't said, no, you're not included. They said, yes, you can be included. The other thing is that they are working with many other community members to develop their sites. So they're probably going to be looking at 6 months, I would think, to get all of this done. But if they get it done by December, then they may be able to come up with more concrete information by February. There is an issue with and I'm just saying this because I've heard this from their side. I don't know what's really going on. The PCIA, which is the public interest charge, something that is required to be paid to the utilities because the CCAs left and took people with them and their accounts with them. That PCIA has now been adjudicated at the CPUC to increase massively next year. So the amount of money that they had available was all of the leftover money from last 2 years, which was somewhere between $15 and $20 million. But that may not be available if the PCIA goes through. So that's why they can't actually promise a large amount of money. On the other hand, Albany is not without resources. Albany has DD. Albany has people, like Marilyn said, that step up when we need to do something. So I think we need to look ahead and forward and be prepared because we don't have a timeline when the emergency strikes, and we need to be prepared for it before, not after. I'm really just heartbroken about the issue in Texas. They had a chance. They could have done something. They didn't do it because it was too costly. I think the question of cost is a really relative one.
Thank you. I'm feeling like it would be valuable to check back in soon on all of this. My sense is that while it's true, there's a potential for scope creep in a poorly defined project. That's like rule one of project management. It's also true that they seem to be asking applicants to co-develop the project, which sounds like a great opportunity to walk in and say, hey, here's our community, here's what we've planned so far, here's our amazing community emergency response team and what they've done and the pop-up resilience hubs that they've already created and scoped and supplied. We want to build on that, and we're ready to build on that, and it's been in our plan. So I think we should check back in on this sooner side and hear back maybe what the result of those meetings. Any other discussion?
Just noting that we don't have an August meeting.
Thank you. Come on up.
I just wanted to say that if there was something that communication is such a big deal, and like we're a very small community, and yet the word has to get out to different groups of people that may be in touch with each other through the schools or through committees or maybe through swimming or whatever, and they don't necessarily connect about various issues. So I don't know, I've gotten active when I've been involved in the schools, but it seemed to me that if there was some kind of a memo that could go on the website, that could be distributed at the schools, that could go out to the community, that the City of Albany is interested in participants who are interested in being a part of a disaster planning plan for Albany. I think there would be a lot of people like this gentleman who just came on and he said, I just retired and I can offer my services. There's a lot of people in Albany who would respond, but it's a matter of just getting the call out. And leaders emerge also. When it was school care, Amy Tick was the person who really kind of synthesized the whole development of this foundation, this group that became so powerful in terms of providing resources for the schools. So the leadership develops within the group, but you have to have some message that goes out from the city that says, we are interested in this. If you are interested, we will meet with you, or we will,
Thank you.
encourage you. Yeah.
Thank you for that comment, yeah. We do, we normally have just the one little time for public comment, but we also have a very small group here today, so I think we have a little more time. Any more discussion from the committee on this item before we close it out and take a break?
I wonder if people in the community could possibly, with data about the actual kilowatt-hour usage at the Albany Community Center, provide a very rough estimate of the net revenue. Because there are people, I'm looking at one, who know the ins and outs of the NBT, the payment mechanism, and have provided an estimate of the kilowatt, not kilowatt hour, but at least the kilowatt capacity of the solar panels. So I think there's probably, the one piece that is not available, as far as I know, is the kilowatt hour usage. But if we have that, and we have an estimate of the kilowatt hours that would come from these solar panels, and we have a rough idea of the rate that the surplus would gain Albany, we could figure out whether this is, like an income of $10,000 a year or $200,000 a year or whatever. That would be really useful just as a very initial scope, and I think people here could do it.
So basically
Right.
handing the raw data to the community and then having them do the rough draft.
I appreciate what everyone is saying. I apologize, Jean, but I think we have to, because we've already passed the time for public comment.
I'm happy to help, thank you.
Thank you. I do hear a lot of enthusiasm about volunteering and what volunteers can do, and there will always be a need for that. But the technical part that you're describing will take quite a lot of labor, and that's what the AVA program is offering to do. That's specifically what this offer is. So it isn't work that the volunteers need to do to prepare to ask for support. That is the support. They're offering technical assistance in analyzing the site, what can go there, and you're adding a piece about revenue generation, which is interesting. And I don't know that AVA would do that, but.
I imagine they would, because they're going to have to sign a financial agreement with the city. I think the financial analysis will.
Okay, thank you, yeah. Just wanted to clarify that is the program being described, is that work.
I would say that's the really detailed work, but a first cut, I don't think would take very much time.
I see.
Maybe an hour.
I hear. Okay. Any more discussion?
I don't want to belabor
Yeah.
this. I don't understand what we would get, like, how does that move the needle? I'm just not following.
Yeah. You mean, like, how would a volunteer doing that?
Well, yeah, and what
Yeah.
would we use that, how would we use that information? I'm just not, yeah.
Well, if it's barely a break-even proposition, that reduces my enthusiasm for the whole thing, whereas if it's something that might pay for itself and pay for some, what I might call Red Cross functions that the Community Resilience Center, the Resilience Hub would provide, then I'm a lot more enthusiastic about it.
I see. Yeah, I think we wouldn't be able to answer those questions.
I think unfortunately, at least 30 to 60% of these project costs are not known at this time, because
Right.
we don't know what the AVA incentive will be. We don't know what the tax credit will be. I think, go for it. I'm not going to stop anyone from doing analysis. I just don't want us to be doing work that's not going to be effective.
I agree. Okay. Okay, let's close out. Let's take a 5-minute break. It's 8:05, so that's the end of item 4.1.
Do we need a motion or not?
We're striking, just for public information, we're striking item 5.1 today because the two people for whom it was put together are not here. So we'll probably bring that back in the future. We'll see. Thank you. 11, and we are returning to our meeting. And we're moving to item 5.2, which is about multifamily EV charging program possibilities.
Okay, so I'm going to be doing a little presentation here. Only one of our subcommittee members is present, but I'll leave some time for him to speak at the end too. This is going to be a little bit similar to the conversation we had in May about the rebate program, where we have things a little bit more pinned down, but there's still some sort of decisions to make and some things to prioritize. And so just a chance for the committee to talk about it in a little bit more detail, so that the subcommittee can sort of drill down and really define some more specifics, maybe for the next meeting or one in the near future. So just to go back a little bit on multifamily EV charging, we had a pilot program several years ago that was for EV charger installation, specifically in multifamily buildings. The city provided technical assistance and funding for charger installation. The technical assistance was yours truly. And it had a $50,000 budget, 15 grand each for 3 buildings, plus 500 for extra stuff. And these were the kind of small, medium-sized buildings that we have a lot of here in the city, the 8 to 20 units. The city covered about 80% of the cost, and the owners covered about 20% in each of those. We went over some of the details of how this project went in previous discussions, so I won't get all back into it. But one of the things that came out of this experience of doing the pilot was that the kinds of installations we did in those buildings were probably more complicated and costly than they really needed to be. And so I spoke about 6 months ago about a concept for a sort of standard installation that we could encourage folks to do that would be less expensive and simpler. Basically, where we're using 120 volt outlets, so level 1 charging, that's connected directly to the sub panel for a specific tenant from their parking space. And the benefit of this would be that all of the electricity they use on that outlet is charged directly to their utility bill at whatever kind of tariffs they use. If they have Carafera, it's all automatic. There's no fancy software. It's level 1, so it's slow charging, but for the majority of people, it's enough for their needs. And for buildings with more service, they could do 240 volt outlets, same approach. And so it's helpful for buildings with less electrical service, of which we have many. So there was a lot of interest in this type of approach. And kind of, we use this, the subcommittee and I, as a jumping off point to think about the ways that we could structure a program to, promote this type of approach or provide flexibility. In the past few months, we've gotten a bit more information. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get as much data from property owners as I was hoping. I was only able to get some short conversations with 3 people. But I did get some information from them. One thing I heard a lot of was that there's not a ton of pressure from tenants to install EV charging. I spoke to 3 people, and one of them was still very much interested in EV charging. The other 2 were sort of lukewarm about it. And I think there's still that chicken and egg issue when it comes to EV charging. All 3 of them had lots of technical questions that in our short conversation we started to get into. And so I think there really is still a need for some sort of guidance from the city. And, as we're thinking about ways to build incentives, how do we do that in a way that kind of gives people enough support so that they're not lost? And, how do we balance that with the flexibility to do what works for their building, right? And then last but not least, there was definitely an interest in funding of some kind to help support the project. That's supposed to say pursue, not purse, sorry. But yeah, they were all unlikely to pursue a project without funding. 2 of them said that even with funding, they're like, maybe still not gonna do it. Depends on, how much we would cover. But the one who was still very much interested was like, yeah, this isn't gonna happen without some incentive money. So, I think there's still not people clamoring for, I want to install charging, this is something I'm definitely going to do. But among the people that are interested in it, that we can kind of push over that fence, it seems like there is still a need for some money to help across the finish line there. Speaking of, learned a little bit more about costs. I spoke to Peninsula Clean Energy, which has a fairly similar type of incentive program to the one we were talking about with these outlet chargers. And their average cost per charger was $2,500. So I think that's a relatively good estimate of how much this type of approach might cost. It might be an extra $500 to $1,000 for chargers that require load balancing if they don't have enough electrical capacity on their panel. And of course, this is always a range. So there are going to be buildings where the setup's pretty simple, there's lots of electrical capacity, and maybe it costs $750 per charger. And then there are going to be ones that are more complicated, and there's big distances to cover, and it costs $4,000 per charger, or $5,000, But just to kind of give us a sense of the range. I'll also note there is a incentive program that just relaunched, a state of California incentive called Communities in Charge. I'm doing some outreach about that. It's really meant more for larger buildings with like visitor parking spaces or, non-assigned parking like that. So it's very exciting, but I don't really think it's covering the same building group as we're looking at here. So just a note. So that's lots of new data. Now to kind of go into the conversation with the subcommittee and what we're thinking about. Subcommittees, we talked last time about a direct install program versus more of a rebate program, and the subcommittee still hadn't quite fallen to one side or the other on this. So I think it's something for the committee to explore tonight. A direct install program would be where, the city is working with a single contractor that's chosen, who's then doing multiple projects across several buildings that are, basically the same project every time. So that's definitely going to require more staff time to manage something like that and city funds. And it could be potentially complex to figure out the structure of that if the buildings are pretty different. But if we get a lot of buildings that are basically the same, might be fairly simple. One of the big benefits of that approach is that it makes it really easy on the owners because they basically just sign up and they're done, right? They just schedule the day that the work happens. And the other good thing about it is that if you get to a certain scale, it can be really cost efficient because you're just doing the same thing over and over. I think for the sort of scale that we're looking at for this program, we're probably not going to get to that cost-efficient point. It's probably going to be more expensive with all the kind of setup. But in theory, we could do a small version that's not that cost-effective and say, okay, this worked great. Now we're going to do more that are bigger and cost-effective. So there's sort of a possibility for that, right? On the other side, there's the rebate approach, which is more like the heat pump rebate program where we would say, okay, if you do XYZ project, we're going to give you XYZ funding. And that's fairly simple to manage and set up, but it definitely requires more from the owners to kind of take the initiative, figure out what the project is, what works for them, get their own quotes, sign their own contracts, all that stuff. It does allow for some more flexibility, though, because, we can say that, yeah, if you install a charger, we'll give you X amount of money. I don't care what the charger is. I don't care what model or this or that. You can do whatever works for your building, right? And so that's where it kind of gets into this question again about, okay, how much do we want to structure it in a way that encourages people to do this thing that we think makes sense? How much do we want to let them be flexible and choose their own adventure? And I think there is a balance there, but we'd kind of have to decide what that looks like. So this question is something for the committee to consider. And then there's also the question of funding structures. And this can apply to either of those approaches. One thing that the subcommittee and I both felt would make sense for this case is to have a base incentive per project and then an additional incentive per charger. And basically what that does is it sort of evens the playing field, because every project is going to have some fixed costs, and then, the more chargers you put in, the cheaper it gets per charger. And so for those projects that are smaller, maybe you got a 4-unit building, maybe, because of the panel, you can really only put in 3 chargers, even though you have 12 units, whatever it may be. We're not putting them at a disadvantage because they're small. And I think those are the projects that really, really get overlooked in state-run programs and things. And so projects that are small, with like 4 units or something. And so it would allow us to kind of even that out a little bit. Another thing we all thought made sense was to have the same incentive for level 1 and level 2. Again, that's 120 volt versus 240 volt charging. Because with that outlet approach that we discussed, there's not a really big cost difference between the two unless you need to upgrade your electrical in order to make level 2 possible, right? If you've got enough electrical capacity, the cost is roughly the same. If you don't have enough electrical capacity, you should probably stick to level 1. So we felt like there wasn't really a reason to incentivize people to bump up to level 2 if it didn't make sense. So that's kind of the thinking there. And then another question is, do we want to, separate the funding out even more and put in additional money for load balancing, which, as I mentioned, is probably something around $500 to $1,000 per charger. So, for buildings that don't need this, they are going to have cheaper projects. And so, you could kind of build it around the cost a little bit more precisely. But then, of course, it adds to complexity, and there is a certain level of there's a lot of different things on the market, all kinds of different load balancers and electrical things constantly being designed and thought up. And so it might be a little bit tricky. There might be some edge cases where we say, oh, does that really count? I'm not sure, So that's where the complexity comes in. But again, the benefit is that it allows you to tailor the funds a little bit more specifically. And I have on the right here just an example of what it would look like, if we had a base rate per charger and then a load balancing bonus. That's kind of how that math would come out for, an example building with example amounts. And then finally on budget, so as we discussed a while ago, the balanced, very, very fancy, finally balanced budget passed in June, and it didn't include any funding for a multifamily EV charging project in the department budget. It only had our existing projects like the heat pump rebate program. That said, there is $18,000 about that is currently unreserved in the Climate Action Reserve Fund. The majority of that fund is reserved right now for the gas line decommissioning pilot. We're hoping we don't have to use it, but it is, tagged for that purpose at the moment. So I think the easiest way to request funding from council for such a program would be to suggest that it come from that reserve fund. And that amount, I'm guessing, could cover about 15 to 30% of project costs for 3 to 5 buildings. So still would be small scale. Based on the amount of kind of interest that I've seen from building owners, I don't think it would like go out the door the first day, you know? I think we'd still have to do some outreach. So, you know, I don't think that's an insanely low amount for a program like this. That said, if the committee felt like they wanted a much larger budget, you can always ask the council. They would have to figure out where it would come from within the existing budget. It's not impossible. It's a harder ask, obviously. So that's kind of some budget context as we think through these ideas. So with that, I'll hand it over to Member Lieberman from the subcommittee to share any of his thoughts before we move into questions.
Sure, thanks, Michelle. A lot of thought has been put into this, and we had a nice conversation with Troy about a lot of this. I love the level 1 charging. I'm still a fan since he first introduced that concept, the direct install program. I really think that level 1 charging is a great fit for Albany in a way that it may not be as much in other places, but we have, you know, relatively short commutes and a lot of single-family homes and, well, multifamily homes also where people park and, you know, can get a decent charge overnight. I think that will help reduce barriers to people getting EVs or plug-in hybrids where they could get a nice, you know, commute distance charge overnight. I like that approach. And then, oh, sorry, I'm not speaking into the mic, talking to myself. One thing I will say that is my personal opinion, I guess, but I will share on this topic, is that I just did a little math while Michelle was presenting, and if, you know, at $3,000 a charge, we have about 7,500 homes in Albany. It would take like $22.5 million to like have private chargers at everyone's home in Albany. And I know this, I'm having scope creep right now. Sorry, Catherine. I think we still only have one public charger and one wand in Albany for public EV charging. And so I personally would prioritize that over private installations. I know it's harder and it's going to be expensive and all of that, but so I'm going to make that plea. But I also love the level 1 thing. I think as far as private charging, that is a great opportunity for Albany to be a leader. And, you know, I think there is a lot of value there in reducing that barrier in multifamily buildings. Those are my comments.
In your analysis, how did you guesstimate the number of chargers a building might be likely to want?
Great question. I based it on the number of buildings we have of various sizes.
Mm-hmm.
So we have, I think, around 50 buildings that are like between 8 and 20 units. We have a lot of 8-unit buildings, a lot of 12-unit buildings, and also a lot of 4-unit buildings. So I kind of did a rough estimate based on those numbers. I don't think this project or this type of program would work for some of our much larger buildings. You know, we'd have to design it in a way where we just couldn't do that. You know, we'd have to kind of max it out and it wouldn't make sense for them. So yeah, it's based on that large number of small to medium-sized buildings we have in the city.
So if the average building is like 9.5 units, did you estimate that they would want to install 9.5 chargers?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. So a question I have then for, I guess, the subcommittee is, did you consider or weigh the possibility of installing just some chargers rather than one for each unit?
I don't think we discussed that specifically, but I think there was some, you know, economy of scale thought that, like, if they're in there putting these things in, then you might as well sort of put in as many as the building can handle and is willing to. I mean, a lot of it's probably limited by how much capacity there is on that,
Building.
on the building itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question to consider, and I think there are going to be some buildings where it makes sense to put in a few and say, okay, well, we could probably install more in 10 years when there's demand. And there's some buildings where it makes sense to just do it all at once. And I think, from a design perspective, we could sort of adjust the base rate and per charger rate to kind of fit that incentive level that we want. So if we want to say, yeah, we really want more buildings to have installations and we don't care so much about how many, the base rate goes up and the per charger rate goes down.
I like that.
And
Yeah.
vice versa.
Yeah.
Right? So there's kind of some flexibility to think about what we want to incentivize the most.
Thank you. I guess I have and maybe just, this is a little nuts and boltsy, but among those smaller buildings that are really common here, how many of them have shared rather than individual garages?
Shared garages.
Yeah, like how there's like a garage, some buildings there's like a garage underneath and everybody parks, which means if you had like 3 chargers, anyone could use it, whereas some of them have like a separate driveway for each unit.
Most of them have shared garages. Some of those 4-unit buildings is where you see the separate garages, but they're usually lined up. So it would be more complicated to put the outlets in each of them, but you can still do it. That said, most buildings with shared garages do have assigned parking spaces. So it would be difficult to like switch on a daily basis, but if you have a new tenant moving in and you need to switch around, that's pretty doable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
I've got a question more for like public commenters, as well as for everybody here, is taking a broader view, and we're going to get to the next item about the climate plan, but how do folks feel about deprioritizing EV charging in order to prioritize the resilience hub? Is that something people will be interested in doing? There's a lot of energy I'm seeing around the hub, and given limited staff time, should we be focusing on that first because it's emergency preparedness, and then EV charging can wait, or vice versa?
That's a great question.
Can I ask also, you mentioned a program that might electrify like larger buildings? Is that an existing program or a planned program? And was that a state level program?
Oh, for EV charging for larger program or for larger buildings? Yeah, that's an existing state program that just launched. And yeah, it's focused on level 2 charging stations that are, it's not exclusive to large buildings with visitor spots, but that's really kind of more what it's designed for. It doesn't fit as well for our smaller buildings.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Not seeing other questions, so let's move to public comment.
Sorry about that. Nick Peterson, please go ahead.
Yeah, this is really exciting that we're bringing this up. I think this also touches on the big elephant in the room is how do you get existing facilities to electrify? What do you prioritize? How do you make them start doing it? And when I was on the committee and was pushing for the point of listing upgrade requirements, this was an intent to start getting people used to the fact that at some point in time, there are going to be mandatory upgrades required. Otherwise, we are not at all going to make the 0% emissions in any reasonable amount of time. And I think it's telling that building owners still expect the city to pay for stuff, and they're not going to go do anything if they have to pay anything. So I think there needs to be there's an opportunity here to bring in some carrot and stick and sort of put building owners on notice that they're not going to be able to run a business, which is renting rooms or renting apartments in Albany, that pollutes the environment and they have a certain obligation over time to bring their buildings in compliance with what we're moving towards. So there's an opportunity here to kind of plant that bug in their ear. And I think this should be an incentive program where you can say, well, you know, city is going to be developing these mandatory requirements where at some point owners are going to have to provide at least 120 volt EV charge ability at every parking space they provide. And we have this program starting that, you know, you can get some support from the city to do this if you're an early adopter. But in a couple years, it's going to be mandatory. So I think putting in policies like this make people much more aware of what's expected and what they need to do, rather than just going, well, what are you going to do for me? And I'll only do it if it's free. I mean, these are people running a business. They're, you know, they have to be required to meet, you know, the obligations of matching the cap goals, and to some degree they can do that. They'll still make money. Now, the other thing is, every EV vehicle you buy comes with a cord with a 120 volt plug. And, you know, you can, it's the base thing that every electrical vehicle comes, and you just plug it into a duplex outlet. I don't see why there's any need to get fancy chargers with big expensive cords or lights or, you know, other fancy deals where you can see what's going on on your phone. You just put a duplex outlet. I can't believe putting in a duplex outlet costs $3,000. So I think just make it simple. They need to provide a simple outlet of a certain voltage. And, you know,
Thank you, Nick. Sorry, time's up. Thank you.
Lucinda Young, please go ahead.
Thank you. I have just a few comments. I love the level 1 charger idea for public, for apartment buildings. I do, however, as Dan had pointed out, I asked myself, is this better use of funds than public EV charging? He asked that question, I asked that question too. Maybe we can do both of them. I guess one of the problems with looking at public EV chargers is that at the city council meeting last week, the public works director said that they would not be prioritizing public EV chargers, that they were prioritizing electrifying the city fleet. So, you know, I don't know how much support there is outside the Climate Action Committee now for public EV chargers. I think Dan said he only thought there was one. We actually have one level 2 charger behind the pizza restaurant on Solano Avenue, and we have 2 fast chargers now at Sprouts. They are Shell level 3 fast chargers, which for those of us who have EVs, it's like the worst. It's obscure. They don't have very many Shell chargers around. You got to have a separate app. And anyway, but at least we do have 2 fast chargers now. But as far as this program, I think the level 1 charger really serves a great purpose. A lot of people are just, you know, using their car for like 30 or 40 miles a day. A lot of people also have the plug-in hybrids now, which, you know, take 4 hours to charge. They easily use a level 1 charger. So I think there's definitely a place for this. I tend to think that we're going to need to provide more than 30% to get the apartment building owners' attention. I wish that wasn't the case, but I just think that's where we are. As far as, like Michelle mentioned, the chicken and egg, I'm not surprised that a lot of apartment dwellers are not asking landlords for them, because I mean, I know people who are in apartments, they just say, oh, I can't even consider an EV or a plug-in hybrid because I don't have a place to charge it. So I think once the chargers are available, that is going to inspire some interest. I also think that it's going to be a lot more effective rather than providing a rebate for the city to provide a program. I just think, building owners who get too overwhelmed, they've got to, with the rebate, they've got to do the whole, figure out
Thank
the
you,
whole thing.
Lucinda.
No other public comment.
Thank you, commenters. We'll move to discussion.
I had a question about if we move towards a requirement for level 1 charging at multifamily buildings, how will that impact affordability? I know housing here is a really big concern for a lot of folks, and the more requirements you add for housing, here's the book Abundance, they talk about more requirements mean less stuff gets built. So there's a trade-off between, yes, you want to have the kind of benefits, but do we impact affordability? And that's also an issue for equity.
Just to clarify, you're asking a question about what the commenter was saying about having mandates for electrification.
Exactly. Like if we mandate that EV charging has to be provided at multifamily buildings, will that make rent go up?
I'd like us to hold on that question since that's not what we're discussing right now.
Okay, maybe for later.
We're
Yeah.
giving feedback for the committee right now. Conversely to that, though, I had to laugh at the part of the presentation where landlords shared that they had no demand from tenants. We don't have rent control in Albany. We don't, and we have a very well-organized Realtors Association that makes sure of that. So landlords won't be getting any demands from their tenants, but perhaps we could help them to do the right thing.
Yeah, I think that was something that, it was very notable. And I think there is basically an assumption among tenants that there's just no hope.
Love it or leave it.
Yeah, and so they don't ask. And we also heard from some landlords, they basically said, oh, there's lots of public charging around, people charge at work, there's the Tesla bank in El Cerrito Plaza, it's all good, there's plenty of charging. And, I think if you have a Tesla, that's probably mostly true because there is that one over there if you're kind of nearby. But yeah, I think they're just not hearing a lot from tenants who haven't considered it as an option. They hear from the ones who have an EV because they happen to have charging at work. So that's definitely, something we can work on outreach around and try to kind of boost the awareness. I will say it's difficult. Like in our pilot, we had a really, really hard time reaching tenants, even the ones in the specific buildings we worked with. So it's a big challenge, but definitely something we'll continue to work on.
Thank you. I also wanted to offer the feedback, echoing what Lucinda said. I'm a bit skeptical that the 15 to 30% co-funding rate will be the nudge that is needed. So it might be wise to offer a bit more money, and perhaps we can make that money go further by not providing a charger for every single unit. One way. Other feedback?
Just a comment. If we go with a rebate program, is there a requirement in there that a building owner who accepts a rebate then has to provide occasional access to other building owners who would like to see what's been done and get a feel for it?
In theory, we could put that in there. I think it'd be a little bit tricky to do just because I think it'd be a little hard to manage that. But in theory, we could require it, I guess.
Just a note of appreciation for the analysis that's gone into continuing this. I was, like the commenters, really upset to see the public EV charging cut from our capital improvement plan. This is not the same thing, but it is something.
Yeah, I will know. I mean, I think Member Bierce brought it up as a question earlier about kind of priority for spending, and I think that is something that would be worth the committee discussing a little bit because, as I mentioned, there's about 18 grand in that Climate Action Reserve Fund that the committee could request that this council spend it on a program like this, but that would mean they couldn't request that they spend it on something else if they approved it. And there's lots of other things to consider. One of the things that I am planning to work on a little bit regarding public charging is seeing if there are opportunities to work with private businesses that have parking lots in Albany to try to help them install some more public charging. I don't know, this is still in the idea phase, so I don't know how reasonable that is and how likely it is to pan out, but in theory, it could be something where it's possible if we had 18 grand to give them, right? Obviously, who knows, and who knows what the scale would look like and everything. I think 18 grand is a pretty low amount of money, so it could be that something like this is more feasible than, these sort of larger things that take more money anyways. But yeah, that's just to say that, like, there are other things. There's resilience hub things that we could spend money on, and there's lots out there. So, we've talked about priority in the past, but as we're kind of getting into the nitty-gritty here, it's probably worth just discussing if this is something that the committee thinks they're likely to recommend to council for funding before we, work on it more.
And my understanding of how staff thinks about programs is that staff generally tends to focus on areas that they control more directly, like rebates, because they're easy to implement and they can get results quickly. Whereas more complex and perhaps more important items like resilience hubs or cross-functional, interdisciplinary, collaborative, discussion-related things can be very squishy and frustrating and take a lot of conversations, but could be more useful in the long run. So it's a question of trade-offs and priorities of, like, how do you think about what Michelle can control essentially and what the community needs to get more urgently, if it's more urgent or not.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think that's quite accurate. Yeah.
Any other feedback on this item? Thank you for bringing it. It was good to catch back up on that. I'm looking at the time. I thought, we're a small group and we're striking one thing. Clearly we'll finish in time. I'm not totally sure about that. But I noticed that we don't have a memo attached for the next item, 5.3. So that's just a quick
That's
conversation. So I think then, I guess, in terms of time, do we have subcommittee updates today? Okay. I would like to move that we extend the meeting a little, but not a lot, because we need time for item 5.3 and then time for announcements and future agenda items. So maybe just to 9:10. That's my motion.
Second.
Member Bierce?
Yes.
Member Lieberman?
Yep.
Member Melgen?
Yes.
Chair Vahil McClanahan?
Yes.
Well, yeah, as the chair said, there isn't a memo on this one, and I'll actually hand it over quickly for the chair, but I think this is really a discussion about whether the committee is interested in pursuing updates to the Climate Action Adaptation Plan and at what scale, and whether the committee wants to create a subcommittee for that purpose. There's been some interest in the future agenda items section about that sort of thing, and it's been 5 years now. There have been updates to the estimates about, carbon reductions needed and goals and things like that. There's changes that have happened. So there is some amount of value in looking at the plan and thinking about amendments. The danger of it is that opening things up for amendments can sometimes get some scope creep. And sometimes it can sort of open the floodgates, and then we'd need consultants, and we're thinking about the action items and all these things. So that can get a little bit tricky. It's worth kind of thinking about that a little bit, and then also a discussion of, what's the sort of value proposition of maybe doing something small like changing the goals or updating numbers like that? What's the sort of value that that brings in terms of, is it changing our actions, our priorities? Is it meaningful just from a sort of, pointing out what our goals are as a city and kind of reinstating that? Or is it maybe not worth the time and we should spend that time trying to do the goals that we have? So I think that's kind of the scope of the conversation. And like I said, we're not kind of getting into the details tonight. I don't think it's more about if we want to go further on this topic. So I'll leave it to the chair to speak now if there's anything more you want to add about what this item is, but.
Yeah, no, I feel like you did a way better job of explaining that than I would have. It's really just like a moment to ask, is there interest on the committee, without going into the weeds now, is there interest in updating the plan given that the last plan was completed in 2019? Because we have had requests, and I want to make sure those requests are heard. It's unfortunate that we're not all here to weigh in on that, but we have a quorum. So this will be a pretty short item, and I think we'll just do the usual flow and see if there are first questions about this question, and then we'll go to public comment.
I have a question. Has anyone on council asked, I'm wondering if if at all, there is pressure to update it?
Not that I know of on council. I think mostly coming from public comment, and I've heard some of that interest reflected back by the committee members. But yeah, I haven't heard anything from council.
Seeing no other questions, public comment on whether we should consider updating the climate action plan.
Sorry. Nick Peterson, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the clock. So I've lobbied the CAC to do this quite a bit, and that's why I was thankful during public comment earlier on that items like this are coming up. So the real reason for this is we're in the critical last 10 years of trying to, we probably have blown the 1.5, which is awful, but now it's headed to over 2 degrees increase. So the science is very clear, and the science is getting more desperate. In the last 10 years, each year has been hotter and hotter and hotter, and we're the proverbial frog in the pot on the stove, just cooking. We're cooking now. And so, we need the urgency, and the climate emergency declaration said this. We're still stumbling around, concerned that can staff do this, when we should be looking at how do we fund it so we can get either more consultants or people going to actually do this stuff, because we need to do things that have impact. If we can't do it, we can't expect everybody else in the world to do it too. So I think we need to at least have a committee or a subcommittee that puts their thinking hat on and, addresses what is the reality that's happening around us, which is we're going off the brink. And it's important, at least for me as a community member here, I've put a lot of effort into getting my home down to net zero, and, bully for me. But again, I think the city needs to lead, and they need to be very direct and insistent on that. That's why I also suggest that, the Climate Action Committee has to start pushing the city council to put in policies that start now at a low intensity, that don't really offend people much, so that they can ramp them up in the next 2 years. So we at least do something during this critical 5 to 10 years that are before us, which is the only opportunity, it will never come back again, the only opportunity to reduce emissions, to somehow stop this nightmare of ever increasing, major storms and heat waves. I mean, people are dying. It's not just Texas. I mean, India, there are places where it's 117 during the day and people are working. So, I mean, these are real things, and we can't just stick our head inside and kick the can down the road. And the science needs to be reflected in our CAP policy. We need to look at it more often and assess whether it's where we really want to be. Thank you.
Lucinda Young, please go ahead.
Thank you for this item. I think we have a really an excellent climate action plan, but our goals are the dates that we have indicated for achieving emissions is really not in line with the current science. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. If this group has not read the summary for policymakers, you should do so. It's really, really important. And we have, I believe it's 6 years left before we're going to hit these tipping points where we're really limited as to what we can do. So these are 6 critical years. We have a federal government now that is doing its best to backtrack on the progress. So I would like to see us look at updating. I don't see redoing the entire plan. We've got a good plan. It's just our dates for achieving emissions are too far in the future. They no longer align with the climate science. I was just at a El Cerrito City Council meeting last night. And by the way, I was so impressed by their council members who talked at length about the climate crisis over and over again. And I learned that they updated their plan last year, 2024. Now, I'm not sure how old the plan was before they updated it. I'm curious how updates are being handled by other cities. There has been a lot of new science that is coming out. So in any event, I think the actions we have in our plan are all good. It's just the dates are too far out. We need to advance those dates, and we really need to impress, I think, upon our staff the urgency of the climate. And I'm not talking about Michelle, I'm talking about staff outside of the sustainability department, the urgency of the climate crisis, and that there's even an emergency declaration and the contents of that emergency declaration. Thank you.
No other public comment.
Thank you, commenters. So what do you all think about updating the plan?
Coming back again, big picture, like what is the other things that we're working on? If we're looking at just the stuff from tonight's agenda, I think priority should be Resilience Hub, number 1, number 2, EVs, and number 3, Climate Action Plan, if we're looking at just those 3 areas. Because a lot of community support for the Resilience Hub, it is squishy, but could review that, is it possible or not, and get a sense of that. But delaying the EV charging rebate program or incentives for direct installs until after there's some less squishiness around the Resilience Hub, so that maybe we can start the hard stuff early, do the simple stuff later, and then we can get a better sense of how far we are on track to meet our goals. I agree with the commenter about we have a good plan overall, but does need a little bit of updates, but that feels like, a project for next year to me.
Oh, I wanted to clarify the question too. I guess the question would be is there perhaps any interest in a subcommittee about this rather than an interest in asking staff to work on this? I mean, I will say that I am interested in being a subcommittee, but I don't know if I want to be a subcommittee of one. I need an accountability buddy.
I'd be interested as well.
You would? Okay.
Again, not in the urgent kind of sense, more like a nice to have, like.
As a nice to have. Is anyone else interested in looking into this?
I think it's a lot of work. So if you guys want to take it on, I think that is great. Like I was thinking like we're never going to get all of this done, but if there's a subcommittee willing to do it, then that's great. And I'm happy to review or whatever. I don't think I have the bandwidth to be on the subcommittee, but I would wholeheartedly endorse you guys doing it. It would be great. And I know it's a very time-consuming process, so I hope that is okay.
I mean, I think the plan was a very, very time-consuming
that's-
process, and then whether the subcommittee would be what is the scope, you know? What I guess I should say, what I would be interested in doing is mostly focusing on the question of updating the dates and the times, the deliverables and the timeline. I'd also love to hear, you know, our usual annual report on what's already gotten done, which is a lot of it. But I would not be interested at this particular minute to reassess the whole plan, which is, as the commoner said, a really good plan.
Okay, I wasn't sure of that, and especially Nick Peterson introduced, or he's mentioned it before, but like having a point of sale, for EV installations on multifamily, like, does that become part of the, you know what I'm saying?
There's so much you could do.
That's what I'm saying.
No,
like,
I'm not
scope
volunteering to
creep
do that right now.
Lighting up the scope creep again.
Yeah.
I just know it's a big lift. But I understand what you're saying. Like you can do it at a sort of cursory, like, let's read through this, see how what's been done and what still needs doing and that's great. That would be awesome. I'd love that. But I know it also, like, when we start bringing it to the full committee and having public comment, there may be people who want more than just the cursory.
That's a good point to
Just
think
pointing
about.
it out. It's all right. I still think that's a good idea, so
Yeah.
I support it.
I do also have noticed that the things that come from this committee that actually do finally get executed often go through months and months and months. So maybe the proposal now would be to just begin that very long process of discussion. All right.
I'll say if the committee does want to make a subcommittee, that would require a motion here with the subcommittee members and the subcommittee purpose.
Is there a deadline to complete the work, or can it take a year?
No, I mean, I'd say if you're not planning to start on it for a little while, it's probably better to wait, because we don't like to have subcommittees that aren't actively working. But if you're going to be doing it slowly over time, that's fine.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I, on a personal note, have a lot of time for the next month and a half, and then extremely little time for several months. So, on a personal note, I am not going to move that we start a subcommittee until I actually have time to be providing updates regularly
Okay.
You are available next month or not next month?
during the next month or two, and then strongly unavailable for a lot of fall, winter, and spring. Well, at least we have an idea of how people feel about doing this.
Yeah, I mean, you guys can think about it offline and bring
The
it up.
procedural question is, can I sign up to be on the subcommittee of one and then invite other people later?
Yeah, that's fine too.
And how does that work? Do I just, do you say we put it out to the CAC by email, or and then people can sign up who are not here?
Yeah, so we can make you a formal subcommittee and put you on our subcommittee updates every month. And then we can add people as it goes. Or informally, if you're just one person, you can just work on stuff and say, hey, I have a thing to present to the committee. So that's fine too. It doesn't have to be formal if it's just one of you. All very flexible, so.
I think I'd be interested in signing up, but I would like to invite the rest of the folks who are not here tonight to be able to join, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah, so you can create the subcommittee now and then have it open for additional members at a future meeting.
Cool.
So yeah, you just have to do that motion. And just clarify the scope of the committee in the motion.
So I think you're switching the scope should be updating the dates, but does it need to be clarified in the scope? Could it cover other things, or just reviewing?
I think just a sense of, kind of the scale of the work, creating a subcommittee to look at updating goals and other minor amendments to the cap or something like that.
Yeah. So I move that we commit a subcommittee to review the goals and assess if we need to edit them in light of some public comments. And I'll sign up for the subcommittee.
Great. Do we have a second?
Seconded.
Great. Member Bierce?
Yes.
Member Lieberman?
Yes.
Member Melgen?
Yes.
Chair Vahill McClanahan?
Yes. Hooray.
I can run through announcements quickly.
Great.
Just a couple things. We have a mini foodware expo planned for next Monday that is specifically for restaurant owners, not for the public, but it's to help restaurant owners come into compliance with the ordinance. Just an exciting event we're having. If you have any favorite restaurant owners, you can let them know. But we've been doing lots of outreach. It's on Monday, the 21st, at the Community Center, 5 to 8 p.m. Also, the rebate proposal that was passed last month by the committee is going to council for discussion on Monday, the 21st, at their meeting as well. Ava Community Energy just launched their e-bike incentive program that's open to everybody. They're doing it on a lottery system, and I believe the first drawing is on the 22nd, so that's very exciting. And finally, this is our last meeting with Benji, who has been our amazing fellow for this entire service year. He's finishing up on August 1st, and we are all going to miss him very much. So say your goodbyes to Benji tonight when we finish up.
Thank you. This term should be longer.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we can go well, if anyone else has announcements.
Announcements.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the Alameda Native History Project has an Indigenous Acorn Granary workshop in Alameda on the 20th, I believe. And there's a Miyawaki Forest workshop. It's free, 2 days, July 24 and 25 in Berkeley. If folks want to figure out how to create a old growth forest in a parklet kind of approach. And the Solano Stroll is on September 14th, and it's coming up as well.
All right, do we have, we're almost out of time.
You could do 30-second public comment.
Yeah, if anyone has a future agenda item request, we're going to try both on PC and here in the committee to do that very briefly, 30 seconds.
Lucinda Young, please go ahead.
Yes, I'm going to use this few minutes to make an announcement. First of all, Albany Climate Action Coalition is hosting a presentation on July 27th on solar and batteries at the Albany Library at 2 o'clock. Second, I don't know if I didn't hear it during Michelle's announcement, so I wanted to just say Tech Clean just yesterday put out new heat pump rebates, both for heat pump HVACs and heat pump hot water. So check those out. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucinda.
Nick Peterson, please go ahead.
I may have misunderstood. I thought this was for future agenda items. But anyway, I strongly suggest that the Climate Action Committee discuss early implementation or implementing policy suggestions to the City Council that address electrification and decarbonization of existing buildings. And that these are going to take time to ramp up, so the sooner the better. But that would be a very good agenda item. Thank you.
No other public comment.
Thank you. Future agenda item requests from the committee? Very briefly, I would love to hear from the Zero Emission Transportation Subcommittee if you meet in the coming month. If they have any comment or feedback on the loss of public EV charging as part of the capital improvement plan. Any other requests? Gesundheit. All right, thank you. We'll adjourn this meeting at 9:11 p.m.